Hi, I'm Steve Gainer. Today we're going to take a deep dive into this camera, one of the very first cameras used in Hollywood, and the camera that one cinematographer used his entire career. But first, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and please ring the bell so you know when I have new content available. Let's go. So today we're going to have a look at this camera, but more importantly, we're going to talk about the cinematographer that used this very camera his entire career. Gottfried Wilhelm Bitzer, otherwise known as Billy Bitzer, was a very, very early cinematographer in cinema history. He first worked for the American Mutoscope Company, where he was a projectionist. And by being a projectionist, he was exposed to the work of W.K.L. Dixon, Edison's camera designer and the person that designed cameras for Mutoscope Company, and also was their cinematographer. He's known as the grandfather of all cinematography. So while Bitzer was projecting, hand crank projecting those films, he saw the beauty that W.K.L. Dixon created on the screen, and he wanted a piece of that. You see, because while Bitzer was cranking those projectors, he realized that if he stopped cranking, the nitrate film in the projector would catch fire and explode, killing him and probably killing everybody in the theater. Bitzer wanted to get the heck out of there, okay? Now let's talk about this camera. When Bitzer moved from the American Mutoscope and Biograph camera into working with D.W. Griffith full-time, he needed a camera that he could move around, that was lightweight, easy to use, and had lots of functions, and this camera is it. So this camera is very closely linked to the Lumiere camera, in that the Lumiere company, when they had a fire, they sold most of their machine works to the Pathé Frères. And so the interior of this camera, the shutter, the pull down the gate, are very similar to the Lumiere, but there were many things that the Pathé Frères added to this camera that made it the hot item of the day. One, you had much larger magazines. So instead of the Lumiere's very small magazine, you had either approximately 200 or 400 foot magazines. Of course, they were in meters because they were a French company. You also have a variable shutter. You have the ability to adjust exposure and focus from outside of the camera on the back and side, whereas with the Lumiere camera, you had to run around to the front, to the lens, and do that. And one of the most important things is this little parallax viewfinder. You see, the Lumiere camera did not have that, but this camera, the Pathé, does have it. And what's so fascinating about it is early on, because this is the first type of parallax viewfinder they ever had, there is a lens and there is a ground glass. Therefore, the image is upside down, just like if you had a view camera. The image in that is upside down if you've ever looked in one. So when you're looking at the frame, I'm looking at that camera upside down. If you pan left, the image moves right. And if you pan right, the image moves left. Now, I can't imagine having to wrap your mind around that, but if you think about it, since they didn't have anything prior to this, they were probably very happy at least to be able to see the frame. Now, it moves ever so slightly because it is a parallax viewfinder. We kind of talked about this in an earlier episode with the B&C camera, but as a subject is closer to the lens, you want to be able to move this so that you can keep them in frame. Really outstanding innovation. So Bitzer was very fond of backlight, and when he would do day exteriors, he noticed that the sun, as it got low in the sky, would backlight the actors and actresses and create very beautiful highlights. Problem was, he couldn't fill it. One day at lunch, Griffith noticed the light bouncing off the white tablecloth into Lillian Gish's beautiful face, and he pointed it out to Bitzer, who had the grips take a tablecloth, put it in a wooden frame, and use that as fill against the sunlight. Now he had the proper exposure that he was looking for. The big problem was his lens is exposed right here, so open to the sun that it would flare. So Bitzer came up with the idea, and he got a Campbell soup can, cut it in half, and fitted it to the front of the lens, and that gave him a matte box of sorts that kept the light off the lens. The biggest problem was shooting at that time of day. Since he didn't have any ND filters, he had to stop down a lot. And when he stopped down, suddenly he could see outside of his normal field of view and see the edges of the can, giving him a vignette. He was really freaked out about that. Next day at dailies, when it came up, he was shocked that Griffith, being a forward-thinking director of the time, said, Billy, you've invented something spectacular, something fantastic. I love it. So with that in mind, Bitzer went and took an iris, actually this iris, off of a still camera lens and had a machinist fit it so that he could put it onto the front of the camera. Let's see if I can do that. There we go. And now, with an iris, he had a variable vignette. And this grew from vignetting to actually opening and closing scenes. They would iris down and then iris open to start a new scene. So cinematographers, the entire time that they've been making films, have been innovators of techniques and technologies that forwarded the art and the craft, and Bitzer, being one of the earliest cinematographers, really, really advanced this. Now, some say that he may have done the first close-up, although Edison and W.K.L. Dixon did do Fred Ott Sneeze, which was a close-up of sorts. All right, let's take a closer look at this incredibly historic camera. All right, first we're going to take the front cover off here so you can see the shutter and the lens mount. I'm going to turn the crank and you see the shutter going around and the pull down moving. Let's look in the back. There we go. Now first we'll look at this little device here, which is where you look through and you can focus and frame on the film itself. Up here is a frame counter. That's very helpful to know how much footage you've shot. And now on the inside, you can see the movement and gait. If you look closely in the center, you'll see the light flickering as the shutter goes around. I'm really happy I got to show you this camera today. It's an amazing relic that we have here at the ASC Museum. You ought to come by and have a look at some of the incredible things that we have. But first, subscribe, like this video, ring the bell, and I'll catch you next time on Everything Cinematography.